Hey everybody, I'm so excited to be here with Carlos Chapman. She is my resident commercial law, business law, everything law expert. Carlos is dynamic, y'all. She's one of the smartest people I know. I have her 12-page resume here, and I'm just going to kind of give you the highlights about how awesome she is. So Carlos is a lawyer and law professor, specializes in corporate law, has like this long dynamic business law career where she represented companies in lawsuits. She has advised small companies, startup companies, both in the United States and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Wow, I have questions about that. And she works not only with business entities and government, she also writes about a lot of really dynamic things in the business, commercial law, government space. Uh, she's involved on a number of different nonprofit boards, community organizations. So really anything related to the spectrum of business life, Carlos has some area of expertise. The other thing I love about Carlos is she is a dynamic tweeter and one of the funniest people in my social media feeds almost every day. Carlos went viral. Was that, what month was that, Carlos? It seems like
In May.
May of 2019 with the tweet that she tweeted in May. It's got nearly 600,000 likes and 200,000 retweets. I know she's broken some record. I have to figure out what it is so it can go on her resume. Put that on page 13, Carlos, of your CV. But Carlos and I are going to have a discussion today about business entities and when entrepreneurs should think about incorporating and how they should think about incorporating. So first of all, Carlos, thank you so much for being here. I am just so excited that we get to talk because I saw you over the summer in wherever we were in Pennsylvania, but we haven't really talked a ton since. So how's everything? How are you? How is life? I bet it's crazy.
It's good. It's crazy. Just very busy, keeping on top of things and, trying to both teach things that are traditional doctrinal things. And I also teach transactional skills classes. So like, contract drafting and M&A. And, it takes a lot of work to fold in real life stuff into the teaching in more time. And also write and also tweet every day. Just doing all that, handling all those. Busy. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're a dog mom, right? So you have
yes,
your whole
yes. Napoleon is actually upstairs. I considered bringing him down, but you would hear his tags jingling on camera. That's not what we want.
Next time
we'll do some time with Napoleon.
That's right. That's right. So you have deep expertise with entrepreneurs and startup companies. And one question I get a lot is, when should I think about incorporating my business? And why should I think about incorporating my business? Could you talk a little bit about that and your experience with that and what you think?
So I actually think you should not do one thing without forming some entity that gives you liability protection. And that might not be a corporation, it might be an LLC, it might be a limited partnership. But when I talk to entrepreneurs, I talk to so many people who are like, well, I registered a DBA. Mm-hmm. Or I did an assumed name certificate, or I opened an account at the bank. And the problem with operating a business and not forming one of these limited liability entities is that from day one, everything you own, people can sue you for it through the business. Whereas if you pick a limited partnership, a limited liability partnership, a corporation from day one before you ever start doing business, then you don't have to worry about going bankrupt personally. You don't have to worry about somebody coming and taking your house or your 401k if you do something wrong at your business. So I try to tell people, like when people are like, oh, I've been operating this barbecue restaurant for 10 years and we just have a DBA, like first I need to take some antacid. And then I'm like, we need to file some paperwork with the state. Like, do you know this only costs $300 to register a corporation or an LLC? And right now, if somebody slips and falls in this barbecue restaurant, I can have everything you own.
Wow.
Because you haven't done that. And so don't operate at all without doing something.
Got it. So incorporate before you start doing anything in your business.
Yes. Yes.
So you mentioned a couple different types of business structures. And I know, we could Google and read about these things, but everything on the internet is confusing. So could you break it down a little? What are the different types of business entities, and when should you pick one or the other? Is there a place most entrepreneurs need to start? Just a little bit about that.
So what I tell people is think about three things. One, like you obviously want the liability protection. So that's the first thing. You want to protect your personal assets. The next thing you need to think about is something that I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't think about at the outset, which is how are you planning to fund this business and how are you planning to grow it in the future? So which entity I recommend for you, if you think you want to go public and have an IPO, or if you think you want VC funds, or you think you want to crowdsource, that's a different entity selection than if it's always going to be a mom and pop business with family members, or if it's a business that's based on like you and your personality, and so you're never going to get investors. You would choose a different entity based on those, with how you think you're going to grow long term. Mm-hmm. And it could be long term, like 30 years from now or now. All these entities have perpetual life and can outlive you. So that's the other thing. And the last thing I think about telling them, and I'm not an IP lawyer, but it's something to consider, is protecting your intellectual property. The biggest mistake I find entrepreneurs make, from my perspective as a business associations person with IP, is that they register their IP to the business. They don't register it to their individual name. And they don't fully understand that you created a new person under the law when you created that business. So if your future investors want to come in and buy you out and kick you out, they also own your IP. And if you're like, I think of my IP as me, I always want to own me, right? Nobody else gets to own me. So if you register your IP to your business, you no longer own you. So the thing to do, I tell people, register your IP to you, license it back, do whatever it is that you counsel people to do, but don't register everything to your business because you lose it. So in thinking about those two options, though, about how you fund it, if you want to go public, bring in strangers, go with a corporation. And that actually contradicts what you will read on the internet. When you read on the internet, everybody's like, form an LLC. I have an LLC. It's cool. It's on trend. Yes, it's cool. Yes, it's on trend. Yes, it's new. But the reason people pick LLCs does not benefit you if you're bringing in strangers. Because LLCs do not have defined laws. They don't have strict rules. It's all based on a contract called an operating agreement. And so that means if you are fundraising with strangers and investing with strangers and things go wrong, you've got to breach a contract lawsuit to determine your rights, liabilities, how much money you get out. With a corporation, we've had corporations for hundreds of years. There are statutes. It's defined that one share is one vote, and you distribute the money based on how many shares people own. And so some of the things that you need to decide at the outset that people forget to talk about, the government already did that for you. So if you think you're bringing in strangers, I still say go with the corporation, even though the LLC is what's on trend.
Wow. No, that's great advice. And it's funny you mentioned IP. So my background is intellectual property, and I see the same thing. And I tend to agree with you. If you are creating IP that is part of you, definitely keep it in your own name. There are instances when your company should own IP, mm-hmm. But you mentioned a couple of points about like your business. If it's not going to be like a corporation where you have investors and give out shares of stock, if the company is you, it's so important to keep your IP. But what if you are not going to issue shares of stock? What if it is going to be a mom and pop type shop, or you'll never want to give away shares of a company? Should you also have a corporation then, or is an LLC better?
An LLC is better. There's also a thing called a limited partnership that I'll mention briefly. That's what people did before there were LLCs. And what a limited partnership is it has a general partner who's in charge of management. It has limited partners who are silent partners. Like when you hear someone say, I'm a silent partner in a business, often it's a limited partnership. And all of those limited partners get limited liability and can be invisible. And the general partner is the person who's the face. The downside of the limited partnership is that if you don't make what we call a limited liability selection, you're still not protected. And so that's why it's fallen out of favor now that the LLCs have come about. So I mentioned LPs because if you do form the LLC, as I'll talk about later, and you want to expand and add more people, you can actually form a limited partnership where your LLC is the general partner. So you have your limited liability protection. And then you could bring on investors as limited partners without, again, giving your company up. So it's a way to bring in investors if things change later, like that LP is your transitional vehicle that you can use. So it's just, I mention it because it's an option. There are no wrong choices at the outset as long as you pick something. But if you pick the LLC and you're like, well, I want to grow or I want to do a joint venture, that limited partnership is out there where you can still be in control and get money from others. So it's a fundraising mechanism. So what the LLC is, it's called a limited liability company. And it is, you have to, file articles of formation, and then you write an operating agreement. And your operating agreement is what determines management, control, how money is distributed out. You can have an LLC that is just you, that is just one person. It can be a single person, manager managed LLC, where you just, you write up your own private document. It's mine, I do everything. What is cool about the LLC is that you have complete liability protection, just like if you formed a corporation, without having to do all the things the state makes you do if you're a corporation. So if you're a corporation, you have to have at least one meeting a year. You need a treasurer and a secretary and a president. There are certain officers you need to have. There are these requirements that the government puts on you if you form a corporation to be called a corporation. If you form an LLC, all you got to do is file the document, list a principal place of business, list an agent for service, say who the initial members and managers are, and that's all you have to do. If it is just you starting a business by yourself, full liability protection, all you do is file one form with the state that you can download from every state's website and literally fill it in yourself, send the $200 or $300, done. And that protects all your assets. So when people don't think they want to expand, I say go ahead and form the LLC. Go ahead.
So if you think you may want to expand, but you're starting just with yourself, you create an LLC. You mentioned the limited partnership as an option as you grow. Can you convert an LLC to a corporation too at some point?
Yes, you can. It's also just this simple form that's on the internet. You can convert an LLC to a corporation. And, that's why I talk to people about how they want to fundraise, though. That takes time. And so if your plan is to solicit venture capital firms, like that space moves so quickly that if there is any chance that you want VC money, I say form a corporation and just have it in place. Because when lightning strikes, if it's going to take you 2 or 3 weeks to file the conversion form, and then you got to get a lawyer to prepare the articles of incorporation, and you got to negotiate the term sheet with the VC, they may find interest in somebody else in that time. That VC space moves so fast. So if you think you want VC money, then form the corporation. The other reason for forming the corporation, there are certain benefits like the Jobs Act and other statutory and I think there are some grants and things too that you can only get if you are incorporated. Mm-hmm. So if there's any chance you want third-party money from the government, from VCs, go ahead and form the corporation instead of the LLC. If you think you want to be solo and it's just you, then form the LLC, knowing that you've got that interim step of a limited partnership where you can do joint ventures with other companies. You can bring in some silent investors by making the LLC be the general partner of the limited partnership.
Mm-hmm. So can you form a corporation just with one person by yourself? You mentioned needing a secretary, a treasurer, that kind of thing. Can you also just be you and you be all those people?
You can wear all those hats. You can be you and have all the offices and have a single person corporation.
Well, ain't that something, y'all? I find things here myself too. So you've given some great advice about LLCs, LPs, corporations. And so once somebody hears this, they think through all these things, they make a choice. What's the next step? You mentioned a lot of these forms are on the internet. Can you just go download any of the forms? Is there a place where you should incorporate? Do you have to incorporate in the state where you live? What's the next step?
So you can form an entity in any state that you want. Like you can form an entity, you could be a Virginia corporation with your principal place of business in Georgia and offices all over the world. Like you can, luckily we're American, you can pick any of the 50 states. A lot of people pick Delaware. That is what is most popular when people want to expand. I found myself counseling people away from Delaware, just like I find myself counseling people away from LLCs lately. And it's because people pick Delaware because they hear about it most often. There are very good reasons for forming in Delaware, but if it is just going to be you and your Virginia business that's only ever going to have offices in Virginia, and you are never going to bring in third parties, it doesn't make sense to pay fees to Delaware and pay taxes to Delaware when you can just have your local business. If you think you want to grow, then you can form in Delaware and then operate wherever. But that initial, how do I want to grow this business? Where do I see it going? That question, answering that question, steers things and steers where you should form. It doesn't hurt if you go ahead and form in your home state and you bring in investors later. You can always incorporate in Delaware too, and just make that the company you form now a subsidiary of that company. So it's always an option when you grow to pick Delaware. I will say the reason people pick Delaware is that Delaware favors management more than they favor minority shareholders and other founders, and the Delaware rules are more concrete and more established. And so VC firms are going to say, we want Delaware. Well, they're probably going to be the majority shareholder of your business. And they know that if they put in some kind of draconian management things, Delaware is going to say yes. So just beware about, if you were to just Google business entities or what business should I form, almost every website is going to say LLC or corporation. Almost every website is going to say Delaware, but they don't tell you why. And so if your business is going to be small and just you and growth is 10 years down the line, there's no reason to pay those fees. Just form in your home state. And if you're also just trying to get started and get some protection, pick one of the entities we talked about today, fill out the form on your state's website, submit it. It's usually a Secretary of State or something equivalent. Pick one of those forms off your Secretary of State's website, and most states have e-filing. You can literally do it in one day.
Do you need a lawyer? So, most people think it's expensive. You got to have a lawyer for this and that, and it scares people off. Can you do it yourself? Should you have a lawyer? When should you think about getting a lawyer for this kind of thing?
So I think it depends on how many people are and whether you're friends or strangers. If y'all are already having disputes, get a lawyer, don't do it yourself. Get a good contract, get a lawyer, and get things hammered out. Don't just fly by the seat of your pants. If you are working with strangers, or if you're working with that friend who's a little flighty, right? You shouldn't go into business with all your friends, but if you think you want to anyway, get that third party lawyer in there to make sure y'all have dotted all the I's and crossed the T's. If it is you by yourself or a small group of people who you really, really trust, you can go on the website, on the state website, pull the forms. They have detailed common sense instructions that you can follow. You can fill that form out. Some of them have PDFs that you can type into and then attach your PDF and file it electronically. You can do that yourself. You don't need a lawyer. But if there are third parties and strangers, I would want a lawyer. And if it is flighty friends or flighty family members, I would want a lawyer. It's better. I always tell my clients, you can pay me now or you can pay me later. If you pay me later, it's a lot more expensive. If y'all just get on the internet and are we've been BFFs our whole life, we want to start this, hair salon, and we want to sell hair to people and all that, and so we're just going to jump on the internet, fill out this form, and go without ever writing a contract. Well, when somebody runs off with all the product or competes and starts another firm or another company, if y'all don't have these documents hammered out at the outset, it could be hundreds of thousands of dollars in litigation when you could have paid $10,000 at the outset.
Wow. So is that how much a lawyer is going to charge you to incorporate your business, $10,000?
It depends. You can find people who do flat fee. It's less expensive than you think. There are some smaller law firms out there that might sell you a bundle of forms or that may like charge you like a, let's say a $500 consultation fee, and then, a flat rate to do all the incorporation process, including articles of incorporation, bylaws, all the documents you need. I've seen more small firms popping up where, maybe they have a $10,000 package or they've got a $20,000 package, but where they've got things canned that you can get from them.
Okay.
I would say, if you're an entrepreneur, find another lawyer who's an entrepreneur too. It may be less than $10,000 if you are giving somebody the chance to form their business by helping your business. Mm-hmm. One thing to note when you're looking for a lawyer to do this, I get lots of requests from people who are litigation specialists who have no idea what I'm talking about, who see the forms on the internet and think they can fill them in. You are not necessarily better off getting a lawyer who doesn't know. So the person who handled your divorce or the person who handled your traffic tickets probably should not form your corporation.
Oh my gosh,
even if they can.
I'm sorry, Carlos, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, even if they say they can. Like, I get so many friends who are family lawyers who are like, well, I handled this person's divorce and now they want to form a corporation. What should I do? Or they'll come to me and say, my client wants to form an LLC. And I'll say, well, why? And they're like, oh, they just heard, they just want LLC. Tell me what forms to look at. And I was like, no, one, I'm not going to tell you, I get paid for that. And two, an LLC may not be what your client wants. Like, you're not even asking the intro questions. So, try to find a lawyer who has represented businesses. Like a chamber of commerce, minority business organizations. A lot of times, like, if you live in a major city and they've got a minority and woman-owned clinic, or they've got, a lot of the Congress people have websites about entrepreneurship and business development. They can direct you to law schools, they'll direct you to chambers of commerce, they can direct you to people who actually know what they are doing. Like, be careful taking word of mouth referrals for attorneys, because a lot of lawyers think they can do this and they can't. And they think it's very simple, and you just have to, because they are forms that are available on the internet, but that doesn't mean they're asking you the questions that I am asking at the outset.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I am so glad you said this, Carlos. So this morning, I published a post on the Leverage blog about this very thing, about choosing IP lawyers, because probably 80% of my business at one point was friends, former law school classmates or whatever, who had filed a trademark application for somebody, filed this or that, and they did not know what they were doing. Mm-hmm. And like you said, you can pay me now, which, I mean, it's a lot now, but it's even more later if things are messed up and I have to go back and fix stuff. So I'm so glad you brought up picking a good lawyer, because so many folks think lawyers know everything.
Yeah.
That's the furthest thing from the truth when it comes to a lot of these complicated topics.
And I feel like a good lawyer, I would be wary of a lawyer who says they know everything. Like, if somebody calls me and asks me an IP question, like I mentioned IP at the outset, the first thing I said is, I'm not an IP lawyer. Like,
that's right.
Let me tell you, like, I know that you need to put things in your own name a lot of the time, and I know what mistake people make, because that's what I end up litigating about. So I can tell you, this is the biggest mistake when businesses break up, is that, there's an idea person and there's a money person, and that idea person put their IP into the company, and the money person edges them out, and they're like, wait a minute, that was my idea. I'm like, well, that's not how you registered it. Mm-hmm. So I can't really help you at this point. I can help you try to get some money back, but I can never get you your product back. You can never do that again. Like, that is theirs. They own it. Wow. So that's the most common mistake I would see, is people, being the idea person, letting the money person tell them, register everything to the company, not understanding the difference, and then losing their idea for the rest of their life. That's what I would see from the litigation side and from the business side. But all the other IP stuff that you're an expert on, I have no idea. So that's why I give the disclaimer. Like, what I litigated about, but that doesn't mean there is everything to know, and that's why I won't file your trademark for you. Like, right? So, be wary of a lawyer who says they know everything, because they probably don't.
Oh, that is a word that deserves a whole sermon right there. Be careful, y'all. A lot of these lawyers do not know what they're talking about when it comes to the thing that they're not doing every day. So, gosh, you've given me such good information, and you've given everybody such good advice. I've got one more question, and then, I've got so many questions actually, but one that I'm curious about, and kind of like you just said, I know business law, I know commercial law, litigation, IP ain't my thing, but I do have like a basic tax question. So you've talked about these different entities. Are there tax considerations people need to think about in choosing like an LLC versus a corporation? And do you have any thoughts there? Do you have any kind of resources people could look at about that kind of thing or suggestions?
So the benefit of all of these entities, like a partnership, you can only if you do the limited partnership, there's only one way you can tax a limited partnership, and that is as a partnership. Partnerships, and I'm not a tax lawyer, but I do know this. Partnerships have pass-through taxation, which means you fill out a separate form that goes with your normal 1040, but the money you get from the partnership gets filed in with the rest of your income, just like everything else. With a corporation, there are two different types of corporations. One is an S Corp, and an S Corp gets taxed like a partnership. So you can have pass-through with a corporation too, or you can elect to be treated like a C Corporation, which is what all the big companies are. And so the reason why there is double taxation with a C Corporation is that the corporation itself has to file taxes. And then you individually, when you get payouts from the corporation, you have to pay capital gains tax on what you pay yourself. You could also form a corporation, pay yourself a salary, and then take dividends. That's another way you get double taxed. But if you form a partnership, you can just pay yourself out of it, put it on your regular tax return, and get taxed that way. If you make an S Corp election, same thing. Just like you were before, just take payouts that way. With an LLC, you have an option of corporate taxing or partnership taxing, which is another reason why people do it. You can switch your election every year. Like if you do a corporation or you do an LLC, you can choose to be treated S Corp or C Corp from year to year. And so I would talk to an accountant about that. In addition to, like, you can talk to a tax lawyer, but most accountants are good at giving you advice on that. There's one thing I have to say though about the accountant advice, and it comes from an anecdote from a friend who heard about the difference between, capital gains tax versus other tax, and was like, oh, well, I want to be taxed as a C Corp so that I only have to pay capital gains tax. Well, the mistake he made was he made a C Corp election, but then he also told his accountant he wanted to take home a certain amount of money every month out of his business. So he set himself up as an employee. Mm-hmm. And he was like, wait, why am I paying taxes twice? And she's like, well, you told me you wanted a set amount of money every month. And that's why I set you up as an employee. But you have to pay payroll taxes. But you also and you're also taking a draw. That's why, yes, you are paying taxes twice on the same income because you wanted a set amount of money every month. So when you talk to your accountant, you need to be honest. Like if you're somebody who needs to have something that feels like a paycheck every 2 weeks, or however much time out of your business, then you should not be making a C Corporation election. Because if your personal finances aren't such that you can take dividends and capital gains every quarter or whenever the corporation pays it out and function otherwise, then that's not the right choice to make. So some of these tax options, and this is a big mistake I see people making, whatever pays the fewest taxes, if your personal finances aren't set up to maximize the taxes yet, don't just do what people tell you pays the fewest taxes. Because if you need money right now, or you need to be getting a certain amount of money, or every time you sign a contract, you need that money in your bank account, not in the business, then you shouldn't be picking a C Corp. That's a bad idea because you can't operate a corporation that way legally. You can, I would say you shouldn't operate any business that way. You should just be depositing your business checks in your personal check account. But you can get away with it more in a partnership or an LLC than you can if you pick a C Corp.
Gosh, all right. So that's another whole sermon right there.
That's a personal finance sermon because I can't tell you how many times people use their business bank account like their personal bank account. Like, no, ma'am. No.
And so you just mentioned some of the reasons why that's bad. There are other reasons why that's bad too, right? Like you could lose that whole idea Carlos mentioned at the very beginning about your personal liability and being shielded and having protection. When you mix the money that way, it's called commingling of funds. Look, I'm not a business lawyer, but I do know this.
That's what it's called, yes.
Yeah. And you could set yourself up where all that protection you've created by incorporating and doing all this goes right out the window when you start mixing funds. Isn't that right, Carlos?
That is correct. And you can find yourself in IRS trouble. You can find yourself in criminal law trouble. Like when you are just, there are all kinds of things wrong with using your business account as your personal checking account.
Hence the reason to not only, so Carla said so many important things here, y'all, but there are just a few things I want to make sure we reiterate. Even if you can incorporate your LLC or your corporation on your own, even if you use a lawyer, you are not done. Like every business needs an accountant, and not just somebody you call every now and again around tax time, but an accountant who's working with you month to month, or maybe more than that, to make sure that your money is doing the things it needs to do and that you're doing the things you need to do, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So maybe you need a lawyer, you definitely need an accountant, you definitely need to understand all of these things. And another thing Carlos mentioned that I talk about a lot with my clients and with folks who follow me is creating a separate bank account, and maybe more than one, depending on when, where, and how you grow, but maintaining a separate bank account just for your business. And, Carlos, I cannot thank you enough. This has been awesome. You've given so many.
The other thing you need is a tax ID, I should say. Like that's what I think you need to talk about.
Yes, definitely. Got a whole series on how easy, so kind of like Carlos mentioned with incorporating businesses, getting a tax ID number, you take an afternoon, 20 minutes, and you got a tax ID number, right?
Yes, yes. And I tell people the other thing, this is important with the tax ID and the tax stuff, and I'm guilty of it myself. I don't have a registered tax ID for the stuff I do separately, but I know, you're shaking your head. But if you are go ahead and get the separate tax ID and get paid in that separate tax ID. If you do speaking and consulting and all these other things, get paid in your separate tax ID, and that just makes your accounting easier at the end of the year. If everything is not lumped into your individual Social Security number and all the 1099s and everything are not just coming to your individual Social Security number, if you're choosing an LLC or a corporation, that makes things easier for you and easier for your accountant as far as keeping track. Every year, I am the worst. I'm the worst on this. I am a better teacher than a doer on this one. But every year when I have outside income, I'm sitting down with 1099s like, wait, is this because I did something through the school, or is this because I did something on my own? And if I did it on my own, it belongs over here on this schedule. And and I'm sitting down like every January, like sorting through papers because I am not doing what I'm telling you to do. So don't be like me.
Oh, Carlos, we're gonna have a whole nother conversation after this is over.
I have a friend in the accounting department who yells at me on a regular basis. So like, I know what my shortcomings are, and that's why I talk to her. So
that is hilarious and sad all at the same time. So do you have any final advice for people about incorporating, about business entities, about any of the things we've talked about?
My biggest advice is be careful of the honeymoon period. Like, you have a great idea, you and your friend want to make some cupcakes, or y'all want to open a hair salon, or y'all want to do whatever, and you love each other right now. But when you are forming these entities, it is for when y'all have that falling out. Once you go into a business together, you don't get to just walk away like you do when y'all have a falling out about anything else. Once you start that business, you're starting it's like giving birth to a child. You're starting a new person when you start this business. And so you need to, at the outset, discuss what happens when things go wrong. The biggest thing I tell people to think about, everybody wants to talk about how you divide up the profits. Talk about how you divide up the losses and how you pay liabilities at the outset. Everybody's like, oh, it's going to be rosy, and oh, she's getting 40%, and I'm getting 60, and all these other things. Like, everybody's obsessed with how much profit people are going to get. More businesses fail than succeed. So y'all have to sit down and talk about what happens when this falls apart.
Wow. another word. Carlos, I'm ready for your book. I'm ready for your book. I'm taking notes. I needed all of this myself too. So just the final thing. So we got all the business stuff out of the way. I mentioned earlier, Carlos went viral earlier this year. And I was just so like happy to see all the good things that were happening with you because of this new opportunity and experience. And so if you have just like one more minute, could you talk a little bit about what happens when you do pop, when stuff happens really fast, life comes at you fast, what you do with that, and how that impacted you and your personal brand and the work that you do around commercial litigation and business entities and that kind of thing?
So what's interesting about the tweet is, luckily I had things in place before the tweet happened. So I already had a website, right? Like just luckily, and just knowing like I already had a website and it still is the same old website because I haven't had time, but at least it is a landing page, basic contact info, like that was up there and out there, and I'd already claimed, I've now owned all the domain names, or most that I can think of that are obviously linked to me. Like I own Professor Chapman, Carlos Chapman, somebody else has carlos.com. There are more people named Carlos than you would think. But, every time like I have alerts on the domain names becoming available, I've been buying up the domain names that are me, or that I think could be me for a while. So have them out there, have landing pages on all of them that are just basically trying to protect my own privacy, because if I didn't have that page, what would happen if when the tweet went viral, somebody else registered to put some crazy stuff out there? Yeah. I can't control that, right? So just knowing that, and I did that just because of being a professor and being on SSRN, being on websites. What happens when a rogue student pops up, right? So I just have been buying up things that are me, trying to own my IP from the outset. The other thing that I had in place, like when I tweet about something that is legal or political, I usually have a work in progress that I'm thinking about. That is why I'm tweeting about it. If I'm just tweeting to share an article, I usually don't write a comment. But when I give a comment, it's because it's somewhere in my research agenda. Maybe it's 5 years down the line in my research agenda, but it's something I've been thinking about. So a tweet like that, once it happened and it started going viral and I started getting press calls and like requests for op-eds, I could easily turn an op-ed in a day because it's something that I had been thinking about with my other scholarship. And so the tweets about reproductive rights and fetal personhood, but I actually write about corporate personhood. And in writing about corporate personhood, I've been thinking about the personhood of women, the personhood of people of color, Native Americans. Like, why do corporations have these rights, but that Black people don't have, and that women don't have? And that's been an overarching theme of my scholarship, like how the relationship of different types of people to corporations and the government, like how do all those entities relate to each other? And so that's how all my work is unified. And so I sent a tweet about fetal personhood, and when CNN called first, and then Washington Post called. And so CNN's op-ed was more kind of a pop culture, this is what the case means, just an explainer kind of op-ed. And so when Washington Post called, everyone wants original content. And so I was able to turn original content on 2 op-eds in 3 days because I pitched Washington Post. I said, well, I write about personhood. Can I expand the 14th Amendment article, 14th Amendment work with you, and give CNN an explainer? And they're like, if you send us CNNs and it's not the same, yes. And so that's how I was able to get 2 op-eds in 1 week, by having that strategy where like CNN wants something today to explain the statute and the cases. Washington Post wants something that's more fleshed out and more in depth because they're, CNN's about what's going to be on the news tonight and hitting what's going to be on the news tonight. They want explainers. Washington Post wants things that are more thoughtful. So just knowing who the audiences are, but I could pivot because I keep listing my phone as I save articles with 1 paragraph explanations about how it fits my agenda. Wow. So I can easily crank it out because it fits my agenda. So even though it feels like, oh, it's a viral tweet, she just pulled this all out quickly, it's stuff that I've been working on for like 3 or 4 years. And that's why I can churn content so quickly. I will say I have been more careful about what I tweet because I do not have time to write an op-ed about everything. So sometimes I'll I'll tweet something. Like I've been posting about when the stuff with Jay-Z happened and Colin Kaepernick. I did some Facebook posts, but I actually chose not to tweet it because I'm not ready to write about it. It is going in a much longer, like full-length law review article kind of project, and it is not something I can explain in an op-ed what is happening. So I've been teasing it out on Facebook, which I find people don't go viral from Facebook posts. People go viral from tweets. Mm-hmm. So I can tease it out on Facebook. The people I want to see it can see it. I can have the discussion, but I haven't tweeted about it because I don't want to write an op-ed until I get the paper done.
Yeah. Wow. I love it. So having a strategy, going viral happens, but you were prepared.
Yeah. And if it doesn't go viral, it doesn't matter because it's like I'm already going to get the law review article out of it. I'm already going to get, a book project or something longer term out of it. Mm-hmm. The viral moment just helps promote that future work. But you don't want to go viral about something that you don't have a plan for.
That is a beautiful thing. Carlos, thank you so much. This has been
You're welcome.
Wonderful having this conversation with you. I am just so impressed by your depth of knowledge and your work and your strategy and all of that. You got to get a tax ID number though. Do some other
I know. But I haven't used one for like 5 years. Like it's so bad. Oh
my gosh.
At least I didn't have to file an extension this year though. I haven't had to file an extension for the last 2 years. So at least I'm organized enough that I don't have to file an extension. But
girl, I can't even say that. So
well, I use QuickBooks, and you can, this is my last tip. If you file your taxes with QuickBooks as a small business, like QuickBooks, they have an app called QuickBooks Self-Employed, mm-hmm. and you link your accounts that you use for your business stuff. So I do have one credit card that I use for business travel, and then I have more than one checking account, but when I do stuff that is business related, I only use that checking account. And so you can categorize things as business or personal on your app on your phone as it comes in.
Oh, wow.
And so when I get ready to do my taxes, it automatically ports over.
That's awesome. Huh.
So if you are like me and you are not organized, there is technology to help you.
It's a beautiful thing. Thank you again, Carlos. This has been wonderful. Where can the people find you? Where can we find you on Twitter, on Facebook? What's your website? All that stuff. So
my website is professorchapman.com. And then I'm also on all platforms as @CarlisC. So my first name, CarLissC. That is the easiest way to find me is, on those various platforms. And then I teach at Washington and Lee, so I'm obviously on their website, all over it, on that website too. But the best way, easiest is @CarlisC, Twitter, Instagram, and on Facebook, all social media that way.
Do you take new clients? Are you taking new clients right now, or are you focused on higher ed?
I'm taking new clients right now. I'm thinking about whether I want to do that. It's hard for me to work. I will do presentations for like nonprofits and organizations. That's far easier. I don't have the time to do individual people's paperwork.
Got it.
It is very, and it takes, and the reason I say no to that is because it does take, if you're going to be able to do a good job at counseling a client, you really do need to do an extensive intake interview before you start just filling out the paperwork, and I don't want to shortchange people. So I find it is better for me to do something like this, go speak to a women's group or an organization, even take forms with me and tell you how to fill them out like there and help a bunch of mass people. But doing one-on-ones, not so much. But I will do group presentations.
Great. All right. Thank you again. This has been phenomenal.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.